My name's Juan Brown, you're watching the Blancolirio channel, and it's time for an update. Okay, next up, the Air Canada Flight 837 on 3 February of this month. The 767-300 that lost a tire and the #1 engine while departing Madrid's runway 36 left. That's a 13,700 foot long runway. Held for nearly 4 hours and came back to an uneventful landing at Madrid. So the 767 has a main truck with 1, 2, 3, 4 wheels on the left main gear. The outboard rear tire blew out on takeoff as the aircraft was taking off for its flight from Madrid to Toronto. So a good load of people and fuel for that trip. I'm not sure what speed that tire blew out at, but that tire blew out hard enough while it was on the runway. With the tangential velocity of all that rubber spinning around, it actually spit some of that rubber forward and was ingested by the #1 engine, causing compressor stalls. Again, for a complete description on compressor stalls, check with AgentJayZ's YouTube channel for great description on the technicalities of a compressor stall. Basically, this is a classic example of interrupting the airflow through the engine with big slabs of rubber, causing the airflow to stall through the compressor section, the vanes, backfiring, and they had to end up shutting this engine down. And it sounds like when you lose an engine at V1 like that, you're spring-loaded to raise that gear. Did this crew do that and find that the gear would not retract? Because listening to the audio tapes on VASAviation's website, it sounds like the gear would not retract. At any rate, if they had the presence of mind to not raise the gear, that would be incredible on behalf of the crew. They knew something was up because as soon as they lost the engine, there was the strong smell of burning rubber. They probably heard the bang of the wheel going, though it would be hard to distinguish the bang of the tire versus the bang of the engine. But it was, in fact, the rubber from the tire that flamed out, or that compressor stalled the #1 engine. So the crew has basically a compound emergency on their hand, a tire failure and an engine failure. So they work it out with Madrid controllers to do a slow climb out and remain in the area to have this thing checked out. There's some massive confusion on holding instructions that you can review on VASAviation's review of the audio tapes. In the end, the crew made a left turn when the controller was expecting a right turn, but they got that all sorted out. It's just, the crew had their hands full enough at the time dealing with an engine failure and a gear failure to be dealing with these antiquated holding instructions, and they were not very well delivered holding instructions on behalf of the controller there at the Madrid tower. Anyways, they got that all sorted out and worked themselves out another holding pattern and decided to have this landing gear checked out. Here's a picture of the #1 engine, or the left engine, compressor stalling as taken from the ground immediately after takeoff as a result of the ingestion of the rubber from the tire. And here's a picture of the various holding patterns that were flown for nearly 4 hours near Madrid. Once they got the engine caged, as we say, or shut down, they've got time. This crew has time, and they want to sort this thing out. if you go into your landing app to look for what is your landing distance going to be, or what's our appropriate weight for this landing with a tire failure, you're not going to find any data. But what this crew does have is a satellite phone, and they've got time as well. So they decided, instead of just doing an emergency return right back to Madrid, let's phone a friend, so to speak. And I bet you they got right on the satellite phone, and on that satellite phone you're able to call dispatch, and dispatch is able to connect you with maintenance, and maintenance is able to, hopefully, if you've got the 767 team on duty that day, get you in touch with the 767 maintenance team, get a team of folks working for you, just like a problem at NASA with Houston Control, and you can begin to sort through some data, because you're in an area of that you don't necessarily have checklists for this compound emergency. An engine failure followed by a tire failure. And the issue is, what weight should we land with for this tire failure? What would be a safe landing weight? The Air Canada 767-300s apparently no longer have a fuel dumping system. Most 767-300s have a fuel dumping system, and in which case you would be able to, and this might be a good case, a good argument, to go out and dump some fuel and lighten your load for the flattened tire. But apparently they do not have a fuel dumping system on this aircraft, so they're just going to have to simply orbit if they want to reduce their weight for landing. So I suspect that this crew was able to get a hold of some folks, and they all worked together and they decided that the best, safest, most course of action would be to reduce the weight. Thus, the long holding pattern on one engine. And some folks would argue, why don't you just come on back and land? The gear's going to be okay with 3 out of 4 wheels. That's the judgment decision when you get involved with one of these compound emergencies. Because generally you want to land as soon as conditions permit in the event of an engine failure. So there in Madrid you have some additional resources as well. Right just to the east of Madrid is Torrejon Air Base. We spent some time there in the 141. Hugely long runway, over 3 miles long. They have the Spanish Air Force F-18s based right there, and they were able to scramble a Spanish F-18 to come up and take a look at the wheel, which is great because you don't have cameras in the 767-300 to look at the landing gear. The 777 has some cameras on it, but not in the 76, and you can't see it from anywhere in the airplane. So everybody did a great job scrambling the F-18 to come up and take a look at this thing, and he's able to tuck right up underneath there and look at this wheel and describe to the crew exactly what's going on with the wheel. It's fortunate also that this F-18 happened to have the correct frequency of radios, and in fact that they had VHF radios on board the F-18, and that the F-18 was able to communicate with Air Canada in English. They were able to get it all sorted out. Oftentimes fighter aircraft only have UHF, ultra high frequency radios, and you have to go through the controller to work out your communications. Here's Spanish Air Force pilot Capitan Roberto Garcia Macias and his F-18, and some of the great pictures he was able to take of the blown tire. Close formation flying for these military pilots is absolutely no problemo, and Captain Macias is staying well away from the wake turbulence of the 767. Once the F-18 checked out the gear and said that the rest of the landing gear looks okay, it didn't rip out any hydraulic lines or anything like that. Of course, they could check their hydraulic system on the ECAM. The crew decided to retract the landing gear. Now this is kind of unusual to me, because usually I would argue that a down gear is a happy gear. And you don't want to mess with a damaged landing gear. You don't want to try and retract a landing gear based on some other folks' report. I would argue to leave it down. But they retracted it and went about their holding pattern. You can get a little safer speed flying margin with the gear retracted. You can hold it a little faster speed. Leaving the gear down is going to be noisy, it's going to be more drag, you're going to burn more fuel, but on one engine, you typically need that gear up for single engine performance, especially when climbing out. It may be that the crew felt that after reviewing the pictures, they were safe to retract the gear. By the way, there were some pictures taken by the F-18 pilot and by the some follow-me cars, apparently at the airport, and I think there was a video of the aircraft taking off and of the actual incident of the tire failing in the compressor stalls of the engine. That was quickly posted onto YouTube, and I think it was posted as an unlisted video. I saw it briefly on YouTube, but not quick enough to see it. But it's the first time that I've heard of where they've actually used YouTube to help get information to people that can help with an emergency in progress. So the folks back at Air Canada Maintenance were able to review that video and help make further decisions as to what to do with this aircraft. Interesting use of YouTube and the pictures. You can hear the approach controller reference the YouTube video over on the ATC capture from Victor at VASAviation. I'll put a link below. So the crew held for 4.5 hours and burned the fuel down to about what they reported as 28 tons of fuel, landed with 56,000 pounds of fuel, which is still a pretty good fuel load. I don't have all my numbers for the 767 here with me. It's not so, again, it's not so much that they're concerned about getting down to a maximum landing weight limit. We've discussed this before. You can land the Boeing 767 and the Boeing 777 over your max landing weight. It will only, however, require an overweight landing inspection. In this situation, they've got the compound emergency of single engine plus a wheel missing or a tire blown out. They don't know what the landing distance is going to be with the blown out tire and if the anti-skid and all the braking systems is going to work properly. So out of the abundance of caution, that's why they decided to burn off the fuel, and they eventually landed uneventfully 4.5 hours later on runway 32 left, which has, by the way, an EMAS system, the engineered concrete at the end of the runway to catch you if in the event that you should overshoot the runway and roll out too long. Engineered material arrestor system, a proven design that works. Here's an example of it at Burbank Airport a few years ago. 13,000 feet of runway, no problem. Winds 150 at 7, gusting to only 8 knots. 1 knot gust, big deal. And that was 130 passengers and 8 crew members. Otherwise, well done. The folks can discuss the options that the crews made. In the end, it all worked out fine. Lots of interesting discussion points in this particular compound emergency. All's well that ends well with Air Canada's Flight 837. Here we can see some of the significant damage done to the #1 engine by the departed rubber from the tire. Damage to the acoustic liner and the fan section at the inlet of the engine. Welcome aboard all the new subscribers to the channel. Check your subscriptions if you want to get notifications as events unfold and as we get updates to stories that we're continuously covering. And because of the fickle nature of YouTube and the subject material that we cover here on this channel, oftentimes YouTube demonetizes this content. Often they'll demonetize it and then remonetize it later after all the views are gone. So to that end, I've opened a Patreon channel. If you'd like to continue to support this station or this channel over on Patreon, we welcome your support over there as well. See the link below. See you here.